My name is Harper Vale, and 5 minutes before I was supposed to walk down the aisle, I learned that my father had not been delayed, confused, or caught in some emergency. He had chosen a side. I was standing in the bridal suite of a historic library with my wedding dress buttoned, my veil pinned, and my bouquet on the vanity like proof that the day was still happening, even while something inside me was coming apart. Outside that room, the ceremony had moved beyond preparation. The guests were seated. The photographer was waiting nearby, and Daniel Reyes, the man who had never made me beg to matter, was at the altar. I pressed one hand against my ribs, not because the dress was too tight, but because my breathing felt too loud for the room. I told myself that for once, nothing from my family could reach me here. Not my mother's guilt. Not my father's silence. Not my sister's talent for turning every important moment into a stage for her own pain. I had built a life outside the house that taught me to shrink. I had chosen Daniel. Then my phone buzzed, and when I saw Brielle's name, some old instinct moved before my pride could stop it. I almost let it ring. I should have. But when you grow up in a family where ignoring the wrong person can become a crime by dinner, your body answers before your mind remembers you are free. I picked up, and before I could speak, Brielle laughed softly. It was not nervous laughter, and it was not guilty laughter. It was the kind of laugh someone gives when they know where the knife went in. Then she said, "Don't wait for Dad. He chose to stand with me." For a second, the words did not fit together. My eyes stayed on my reflection, on the white dress, the pinned veil, the woman who was supposed to be a bride and suddenly looked like a daughter being left behind again. I asked what she was talking about, though some part of me already knew. Brielle lowered her voice like she was sharing something intimate instead of cruel. "You should have remembered your place." That was the sentence that did it, not because it shocked me, but because it sounded too familiar. My place had always been wherever everyone else's feelings left room for me. My place was the auditorium where I searched the seats for my father and found an empty chair. My place was the dinner table where Brielle cried louder and got comfort while I sat quietly and got praised for being mature. My place was the corner of every celebration, useful enough to help, stable enough to ignore, strong enough to disappoint. The worst part was not that I believed her. The worst part was how fast a part of me knew she was telling the truth. I whispered, "Where is he?" But Brielle had already given me the only answer she wanted. She said, "With the daughter who actually needs him today," and ended the call before I could ask whether he knew, whether my mother knew, whether anyone had considered what it would feel like for me to walk into that room alone while every guest wondered what I had done to make my own father stay away. A knock came at the door before I could move. Lena, the coordinator, spoke carefully and said the ceremony was ready whenever I was. A second later, the photographer asked, almost apologetically, "Do we still want the father-daughter entrance shot?" That question nearly split me open, because my father was not missing. He was in the building. He was close enough to walk to me and still choosing not to. The guests were waiting. Daniel was waiting. Everyone was about to watch me search for a man who had already chosen someone else first. Before I tell you what happened next, be honest with me. If your father abandoned you 5 minutes before your wedding and then came back right before the doors opened, would you still let him walk you down the aisle? The bridal suite door opened and I expected Lena. Instead, Evelyn Brooks stepped inside, took one look at my face and said, "What did your sister do this time?" That was when I realized this disaster did not look strange to someone who had been watching my family hurt me for years. Evelyn Brooks stepped into the bridal suite like she had been sent by the part of my life that still remembered how to breathe. She did not rush toward me, panic, or ask useless questions when she could already tell the answer would hurt. She closed the door, looked at the phone in my hand, and held out her palm. I gave it to her because I trusted her with the truth. Brielle had ended the call, but the last text was there, bright and cruel. "Don't make this harder. Dad knows who actually needs him today." Evelyn read it once, then again, her face hardening as if an adult had failed a child. She looked at me and asked, "She told you this now?" I nodded. Evelyn's mouth tightened. "Cruel people love timing," she said. "It lets them pretend the damage was accidental." The worst part was that I still wanted to explain them. Standing there in my wedding dress, 5 minutes from the aisle, I heard myself start doing the work I had done my entire life. Maybe Dad misunderstood. Maybe Brielle panicked. Maybe Mom was trying to fix it quietly because she hated scenes. Maybe there was some missing piece that would make this feel less like abandonment and more like a mistake. Evelyn did not let me finish. She stepped closer and said, "Harper, your father's failure today is not proof that you are hard to love." I laughed once, but there was no humor in it. "Then why does he keep proving I'm easier to leave?" Evelyn did not flinch, and that almost made me cry harder, because most people flinch when you hand them the sentence you have carried since childhood. She had known me before I had language for that wound. She knew the girl who stayed after school because going home early meant sitting where Brielle's moods decided the weather. She knew the student with perfect grades and unsigned permission slips because Thomas forgot and Marianne promised to remind him, then forgot too. The memory that came back hardest was my scholarship ceremony when I was 17. I had won an award that could help me get into college, and Thomas had promised he would be there. I remember standing on that small stage with a certificate in my hands, staring into the chairs until my eyes found the one place he should have been. Empty. Later, I found out he had taken Brielle to a bridal expo because she was building her future. I told myself it did not matter, because that was what good daughters did when disappointment arrived wearing their father's face. Evelyn found me afterward near the vending machines, still holding the certificate like it might become heavier if I admitted what it meant. She sat beside me without asking me to smile and said, "A child should never have to pretend an empty chair is normal." I did not understand then how many years I would spend needing that sentence, but I understood it now, standing in satin while another empty place waited to be explained. Maybe that was why I became a school counselor. I understood invisible children. I knew how to recognize the kid who smiled too quickly, apologized too often, and never asked for anything because needing things had become dangerous. I built my career around noticing what adults missed, and my family treated that like a hobby. Thomas called it sweet but impractical. Marianne said I had always been sensitive. Brielle once said at dinner, "Of course Harper chose a career around broken kids. She loves being needed." Everyone laughed, and I laughed too because I had been trained to make insults smaller. Another knock came, and Lena opened the door enough to tell me Daniel had asked whether I needed anything. Daniel could feel me from across the building, while my father could ignore me from inside the same venue. Daniel did not need me to perform hurt before he noticed me. My father needed an audience before he remembered me. Evelyn looked at my bouquet, then back at me. "You have spent your life being reasonable so other people could be selfish without consequences," she said. "Not today." My throat burned, and the truth came out before pride could stop it. "I still want him here." Her voice softened. "Of course you do. Wanting your father does not make you weak, but wanting him does not mean he has earned the right to stand beside you." I looked at the phone again, at Brielle's message, at the proof that my wedding day had become another place where my pain was expected to make room for hers. Then I picked up my bouquet. My hands were shaking, but my voice was steady when I said, "I need to know what she told him." Evelyn nodded. "Then let's stop letting her control the story." We opened the bridal suite door together, and I thought I was walking toward an explanation. Instead, I walked straight into the trap my sister had built for me. Evelyn and I stepped out of the bridal suite together, and for the first time since Brielle's call, I felt something colder than panic moving through me. It was clarity, the kind that arrives while your heart is breaking but your mind stops defending the people holding the hammer. The hallway outside the ceremony room was narrow and polished, lined with framed photographs of the old library. I had loved that when Daniel and I chose the place. Now it felt like I was walking into one more family story where everyone knew their role except me. I made it halfway toward the side entrance before I saw her. Brielle stood beneath a brass wall lamp in her champagne bridesmaid dress, looking flawless when someone else's pain had become useful to her. Her phone rested in her hand like proof that she had been ready for this. She was not crying. She was waiting. When she saw me, she smiled. "There she is," she said. "I wondered if you were going to hide until everyone got uncomfortable." I stopped a few feet away. "Where is Dad?" Brielle tilted her head. "You mean the man I told you not to wait for?" Evelyn shifted beside me, and Brielle's eyes moved to her. Her smile sharpened. "This is family business." Evelyn's voice stayed calm. "Then perhaps you should have acted like family." Brielle laughed. "She ran to a retired principal on her wedding day. That tells everyone exactly what they need to know." The old version of me would have looked down and tried to make Brielle less angry. But that woman was still back in the bridal suite, hoping cruelty had an explanation. I stepped forward and said, "Tell me what you said to him." Brielle lifted one shoulder. "I told him the truth." "No," I said. "You told him whatever made him feel rejected enough to choose you." For the first time, something in her expression tightened. "I told him you were embarrassed by this family. I told him this wedding was more Daniel's people than ours. I told him you wanted everything clean and perfect, and maybe having Dad walk you down the aisle did not fit whatever image you were trying to sell." My stomach went cold. "I never said that." "You didn't have to," she said. "You walk around like we are all something you survived." I stared at her as the pieces clicked together. She had not simply cried to our father. She had built him a doorway out of being there for me. She had taken every frustration I had swallowed, every tired look, and turned it into proof that I had rejected him first. She had made my abandonment sound like his self-respect. "You made him believe I didn't want him there," I said. Brielle's eyes flashed. "I made him admit he felt unwanted." "No," I said. "You gave him permission to abandon me and call it self-respect." Her face hardened. "You always do this," she said. "You stand there calm and wounded, and people fall over themselves trying to protect you. You have the perfect hero fiancé, your counselor job, your sad little kids who worship you, and now this tasteful wedding everyone keeps complimenting. You love being the good one." That was when I understood. This had never really been about Dad. It was about the fact that, for once, people had gathered to look at me with joy. Brielle could tolerate me being useful. She could tolerate me being overlooked. What she could not tolerate was me being seen. She leaned closer. "You always survive being hurt, Harper. That's why nobody feels guilty doing it." The sentence hit harder than yelling, because it was not only cruel, it was accurate. It was the family logic spoken out loud. I survived, so they kept wounding. I stayed calm, so they kept taking. I recovered, so they called it proof the injury had not mattered. I said, "You called me 5 minutes before my wedding because you wanted me to walk in there already bleeding." Brielle's mouth twisted. "No, I called because someone needed to remind you this family does not revolve around you just because you put on a white dress." Before I could answer, my mother appeared at the end of the hallway, already crying. Marianne Vale had always summoned tears before accountability arrived. "Please," she whispered. "Not here. Not today." I turned to her. "Did you know Dad wasn't coming?" Her eyes went to Brielle first, just for a second. That was all I needed. "Mom," I said, "was he ever delayed?" Marianne's face folded. "He was upset. Your sister was upset. Everything happened so quickly." "That's not what I asked." She looked down. "He's in the building." "Where?" "In one of the side rooms," she said. "With Brielle. I thought if we told Lena he was late, you would walk alone and explain later." "So you lied to the coordinator." "I was trying to keep everything from falling apart." "No," I said. "You were trying to keep the truth from showing." Marianne's tears spilled over. "Just walk alone. Don't make your father look cruel in front of everyone." Something in me went still. He made himself look cruel when he chose to be absent. I'm done editing the picture. Lena appeared. "Harper," she said, "we really need to begin." Brielle lifted her chin. "Go on then. Show everyone how strong you are." Then the side door opened and Thomas Vale stepped into the hallway. He looked from my mother to Brielle to Evelyn and to me. And the first person who looked afraid was not me. It was Brielle. Thomas Vale stepped into the hallway in his dark suit. and for one strange second, nobody moved. He looked older than he had that morning, not because the day had aged him, but because guilt had reached his face before he could arrange it into something respectable. He was not brave. He was not innocent. He looked cornered, like a man who had waited too long to do the right thing and wanted credit for arriving before witnesses noticed. Brielle was the first to speak. "Dad, why are you here?" That sentence exposed everything she had tried to dress up. He had not been delayed, trapped in traffic, confused by the schedule, or pulled away by an emergency. He had been exactly where Marianne said he was, inside this building, close enough to reach me, and still far enough away to let me suffer. He had chosen Brielle, and everyone expected me to absorb it because that was what I had always done. Not this time, and not today. I looked at him and asked, "Were you going to let me stand there waiting for you?" Thomas opened his mouth, but no answer came out. The silence told me more than any apology could have. It told me he had rehearsed excuses, not truth. It told me he had imagined me hurt, but not enough to change course. Even now, he was measuring what could be repaired before people started asking questions. Finally, he said, "I was going to come in before the music started." I almost laughed. Before the music started? Or after I had already accepted that you were not coming? He looked away. Marianne whispered my name, but I did not turn toward her. I had spent years answering that voice, the one that asked me to soften myself before the person who hurt me had to explain anything. Thomas said Brielle had been very upset. She felt replaced. She felt like my new life with Daniel was pushing the family out. She felt humiliated by the wedding, the guest list, the people from my work, and the way Daniel's family had welcomed me without making her the center. He spoke as if Brielle's feelings were whether the rest of us had to survive. "It is my wedding day," I said. "I know that," he answered. "Do you?" His face tightened, but I did not stop. "Did you ask me?" He frowned. "Ask you what?" "When Brielle told you I didn't want you beside me, did you ask me if it was true?" Thomas stared at me as if the question had come from a language he had never learned. "I didn't want to make things worse. You believed the worst version of me because it was easier than having a conversation." That was the wound underneath everything. It was not only that he had chosen Brielle. It was that he had accepted a version of me where I was cruel, ashamed of him, and secretly trying to erase my family because believing that version let him feel less guilty about abandoning me first. He swallowed. I was trying to keep peace. The hallway seemed to narrow around that sentence. Keep peace. Do not upset Brielle. Do not make Marianne cry. Do not force Thomas to choose. Be easier. Need less. Disappear politely. That was the family prayer, repeated so often it had stopped sounding like cruelty and started sounding like character. Evelyn spoke then, steady and calm. "Peace that depends on one child swallowing pain is not peace, it is training." Thomas stiffened. "This is a family matter." It became more than that when your daughter needed an adult and every adult in this hallway chose convenience. Brielle snapped. "Now the school principal gets to lecture us?" Evelyn did not even look at her. Her eyes stayed on my father. "A child should not have to become convenient to be loved." Thomas looked embarrassed, which was not the same as remorse. Embarrassment wanted the room to stop looking. Remorse would have wanted to understand. He tried again. "Harper, I thought you could handle it better than she could." Everything inside me went still. There it was. Not hidden behind family, timing, confusion, or peace. The whole story in one sentence. Brielle could not handle being disappointed, so everyone protected her. I could handle being hurt, so everyone hurt me. My strength had never been admired. It had been used as evidence that I did not need protection. "That was always your excuse for hurting me," I said. Thomas looked sick. Marianne covered her mouth. Brielle looked away. I stepped closer. "You reward whoever screams loudest and punish whoever stays quiet. Then when the quiet one finally speaks, you call her difficult. That's not fair," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "No," I replied. "What wasn't fair was being trained to survive disappointment, and then watching you use my survival as permission to keep disappointing me." He had no answer. For years I had thought if I explained it correctly, if I chose the right tone, the right private moment, the right gentle words, He would finally understand. But standing there in my wedding dress, I understood something colder. He had understood enough. He preferred the version where my pain cost him less. So I asked the question that mattered. If I had not found out, would you have told me before the ceremony? Thomas was silent. Not a pause, not confusion, a confession. I nodded slowly. You would have let me walk in there wondering what I did wrong. His head lowered, and the child in me wanted shame to mean change. Lena said the doors needed to open. Thomas panicked. He took one step forward and said, "Let me walk you down the aisle." Once I would have taken those words like bread. I would have told myself he came around. I would have forgiven him before he apologized because starving daughters learn how to make crumbs look like a meal. But he was not offering because he had protected me. He was offering because people were about to see that he had not. I looked at him and said, no. The word was small. But in my family, it sounded like glass breaking. Thomas stared at me as if the word no had not belonged in my mouth. For a second, he blinked, waiting for the correction, the apology, the nervous laugh I used whenever I made someone uncomfortable by having feelings. Marianne gasped like I had struck him. Brielle's mouth curved enough to tell me she thought I had made a mistake, that by refusing him, I had made myself look cruel in front of people my parents cared about. Thomas said, "What?" I held his eyes. No. His voice softened in the way it always did when he wanted forgiveness before accountability. "Harper, don't do this." That sentence almost worked because there was still a daughter inside me who had spent years wanting him to say my name like I mattered. But wanting him did not make him safe. Wanting him did not erase the hallway, the lie, the side room, or the fact that he had been close enough to reach me and still chose not to. I said, "You don't get to perform fatherhood at the last minute." Thomas looked wounded, which might have moved me once. Marianne stepped closer, her hands twisting together. "He came back," she said. "That has to count for something." "He came back because the doors were about to open," I said. Thomas flinched, and I saw his shame without feeling responsible for covering it. I had protected him from that feeling for too long. I had explained away missed ceremonies, forgotten promises, distracted phone calls, and birthdays where he remembered Brielle's moods better than my face. I had edited every picture of childhood until his empty places looked less empty. I was done. "I am not humiliating you," I told him. "I am refusing to hide what you chose. I am done editing the picture so you can still look like a good father in it." Marianne's tears got heavier. "Please," she whispered, "do not punish your father in front of everyone." I turned to her then, and whatever softness she expected from me was gone. "You were willing to let me be abandoned in front of everyone. Why is his embarrassment more urgent than my pain?" She opened her mouth, but no answer came. That silence was familiar too. My mother always had speeches when she wanted me to forgive, but never language when I asked why I had to be hurt first. Brielle stepped in before the silence could expose too much. "You're being dramatic," she said. "You always do this. You turn everything into proof that you're a victim." I looked at her, and the anger inside me became strangely clean. "You arranged a humiliation and called it honesty. I am setting a boundary and you are calling it drama." Her smile disappeared. From the far end of the hallway, Marcus, Daniel's best man, appeared. He must have sensed the delay had become more than timing. His eyes moved from my face to my father, then back to me. "Do you want me to get Daniel?" he asked. For 1 second, the idea tempted me. Daniel would have come. Daniel would have stood beside me without needing the whole story. But this was not his wound to fight before we had even said our vows. I shook my head. "No, I am not making Daniel fight the family that should have protected me." Saying it out loud steadied me. I was not waiting to be rescued. I was choosing who deserved to stand beside me. I turned to Evelyn. She had been quiet, and that was part of why I could trust her. She had not pushed herself forward. She had not claimed a role. She had stayed close enough to catch me if I broke and far enough away to let me decide. Her eyes were full, but her posture was steady, like when I was 17 and trying not to cry over an empty chair. "Evelyn," I said, my voice shaking but clear, "will you walk with me?" Her face changed. Harper, you were there when my father missed the scholarship ceremony, I said. You wrote the recommendation that helped me get into college. You sent me books when I became a counselor. You taught me that unwanted children are not unworthy. If anyone walks me down that aisle, it should be someone who showed up before anyone was watching. Brielle exploded. You're replacing Dad with a retired principal at your wedding? No, I said. I am choosing the person who did the job before anyone asked for the title. Brielle turned to Thomas. Say something, but he could not. For once, saving her would mean admitting what he had done to me, and he was trapped between the daughter who demanded rescue and the truth he could no longer bury. Thomas's voice dropped. Please, Harper, don't embarrass me like this. I looked at him one last time. You were willing to let me walk in alone. I am not the one who made this public. Then I gave him the truth he had earned. You lost the aisle before I took it from you. Lena opened the doors, and the guests began to rise. I placed my hand on Evelyn's arm. I did not walk toward my future as the daughter they left behind. I walked as the woman who finally stopped asking permission to matter today. The doors opened, and for one suspended moment, every version of the life my family had tried to assign me stood behind me in that hallway. Thomas was back there with his shame, Marianne with her tears, Brielle with her fury, and Evelyn beside me with the quiet strength of someone who had never needed a title to act like family. I placed my hand on Evelyn's arm and stepped forward, and the ceremony room turned toward me. At first, people smiled. Then the smiles shifted. Confusion moved through the rows as guests noticed what was missing. My father was not beside me. Evelyn Brooks was. My mother's face looked broken from crying. Brielle stood near the side entrance with anger written across her posture. Thomas was not in the place everyone expected him to be, and for once I did not explain the absence. That was the hardest part. Not walking, not being stared at. The hardest part was resisting the old reflex to make everyone comfortable. I wanted to say there had been a misunderstanding, smile too brightly, wave off the tension, and hand my family another clean version of a dirty truth. I had spent years translating their neglect into softer language so nobody else had to see it clearly. Evelyn felt my hesitation, leaned close, and whispered, "Keep walking." So I did. Each step felt like leaving something behind. The daughter who apologized for needing things, the sister who let Brielle's jealousy become the weather, the child who made empty chairs look normal, the bride who had almost walked into her own ceremony carrying a lie so her father could still look honorable. I did not explain. I did not apologize. I kept walking. Daniel saw me before I reached the front. His face changed in a way I will never forget, not with embarrassment, confusion, or disappointment, but with recognition. He understood enough. He did not look past me to Thomas. He did not glance toward Brielle. He did not wait for approval. He stepped down from the altar and met me halfway. Daniel was not staying safely in his assigned place while I carried the discomfort alone. When he reached us, his eyes stayed on mine, and his voice was low enough that it belonged only to me. You don't owe me an explanation in front of people who owe you an apology. I almost lost myself then, not because I was weak, but because kindness can hurt when you are used to earning it. Evelyn placed my hand into Daniel's, and before she stepped back, she kissed my cheek and whispered, "You were never hard to love." I felt tears rise, but this time they did not feel like defeat. They felt like grief finding the door. Pastor Neil waited until I nodded. Then the ceremony continued, though everyone knew it was no longer the ceremony we had rehearsed. Daniel unfolded his vows, looked at the paper, and lowered it. He said he had written promises about partnership, laughter, and ordinary mornings, and he still meant them. But after seeing me walk in with truth instead of performance, he needed to promise something more. He promised me a home where silence would never be used as punishment, a marriage where strength would never be treated as proof that I could be left alone, A love where I would not have to shrink to keep peace, and a future where my pain would never be treated as an inconvenience. Then he said, I will never ask you to be easy to abandon just so I can call you strong. I had prepared vows too. Careful ones, words written by the version of me who thought the day would be tender. I looked at them in my hand and knew they belonged to a different morning. So I folded them and spoke from the place the day had opened in me. I used to think love meant becoming easier to choose, I said. I thought if I needed less, forgave faster, and stayed quiet longer, people would finally see me. But real love does not make you compete for a place. Real love does not turn your patience into permission to neglect you. Today, I am not promising to be easy to love. I am promising to stop confusing love with being easy to abandon. For a moment, nobody moved. Then I saw Thomas near the back. He had no role now, no daughter on his arm, no picture to complete, no tradition left to hide inside. Jenna had lowered her camera because the father-daughter entrance had not happened. Sophia Reyes watched Thomas with disappointment that did not need to raise its voice. Thomas cared about looking respectable. For the first time, the image was gone. Then Thomas stood. Not proudly, not like a hero, like a man cornered by the truth he had hoped would stay private. Harper, he said, I failed you today, and not only today. I do not have the right to ask you to hide that so I can look better. I did not thank him. I only nodded once. Brielle could not tolerate that. She stepped forward and said, Are you serious? You're all letting her turn this into a performance? Daniel turned calmly. This ceremony is not yours, Evelyn added. A sister who loved her would have protected this moment. Brielle looked at Thomas. Dad, are you choosing her? Thomas's voice shook, but his answer did not. I am choosing the truth. I turned back to Daniel and said, I'm getting married? Pastor Neil continued. We exchanged rings. When Daniel kissed me, the room exhaled into applause, not only because a marriage had begun, but because a lie had collapsed and love had kept standing. As we walked back together, Brielle stood frozen near the side. My sister wanted me to be seen as the bride my father abandoned. Instead, she became the woman everyone watched lose control. The reception began the way people pretend normal life can resume after everyone has watched a truth tear through a room. Glasses were raised, servers moved between tables, and guests offered polite smiles that did not reach their eyes. Nobody said my father had lost his place beside me. Nobody said my sister had tried to turn my wedding into abandonment. They did not need to. The atmosphere had changed and silence carried what happened. Thomas stood near the edge of the room with the posture of a man who wanted to disappear without looking guilty. Some guests avoided him. Others gave him the brief greeting people give when they know too much. Marianne kept dabbing at her face, not loudly enough to interrupt anything, but visibly enough to invite sympathy if anyone wanted it. Brielle refused to sit down. She drifted near the entrance, still in her bridesmaid dress, still furious that the story had moved without her permission. I was speaking with Daniel's aunt when I saw Brielle corner Thomas. I could not hear every word at first, but I saw her expression, and I knew that look. It was the look she wore whenever she had been denied rescue and wanted the room to believe she had been attacked. Then her voice rose enough for nearby guests to turn. You humiliated me for her, Brielle said. Thomas looked exhausted. For once, he did not immediately soften himself for her. No, Brielle, he said. You humiliated yourself. I had never heard him say anything like that to her. Not when she ruined birthdays. Not when she cried her way out of consequences. Not when I was expected to apologize for the discomfort her behavior created. The sentence did not fix him, and it did not heal me, but it changed the room because Brielle had never learned how to stand without someone holding up her version of events. She turned quickly, searching for another audience. This is exactly what Harper wanted, she said. She manipulated everyone. Evelyn poisoned the moment. Daniel's family is judging us like they know anything, and Dad was only trying to help both daughters. Harper made her wedding about old wounds. Sophia Reyes, Daniel's mother had been standing a few feet away. She did not raise her voice. She only asked, "Did you call the bride 5 minutes before the ceremony and tell her not to wait for her father?" The question landed with more force than an accusation. Brielle opened her mouth, ready to deny it, but she had never been good at stopping once attention found her. Someone had to remind her this family does not revolve around her just because she put on a white dress. The room went still around that sentence. For a moment, Brielle seemed to realize she had said too much. I looked at her and felt no need to rescue her from it. "Thank you," I said. She blinked. "For what?" "That is the first honest thing you've said today." Her face sharpened. "Do not twist my words." "I do not have to," I said. "You keep handing them over." Evelyn stepped beside me. "I saw the message," she said calmly. "Brielle wrote that Thomas knew who actually needed him today." Lena, who had been trying to protect the reception, added carefully, "Brielle also told staff earlier that Mr. Vale was unavailable before Harper had been informed." Then Jenna, the photographer, looked uncomfortable but spoke anyway. She asked me before the ceremony whether I should be ready to capture Harper's solo entrance, in case the father-daughter walk did not happen. That was the detail that changed the air for me. Brielle had not only wanted me abandoned, she had wanted it photographed. She had imagined the image before I even knew the wound existed. A bride walking alone, a room full of whispers, a tragedy she could later explain in whatever way made her look injured and me look unstable. Brielle turned on me. "You are enjoying this." "No," I said. "You wanted me to walk into that room wounded and confused. I walked in with someone who loved me. That is what you cannot forgive." "You always make yourself the victim." "No," I said. "I just stopped making myself the cover story." Daniel stepped beside me, steady without being theatrical. "This is our wedding," he said. "You're not using it as your stage anymore." Brielle looked past him to Marianne. My mother was crying, but this time her tears did not move the room. Then Brielle looked at Thomas, waiting for the old system to activate. He looked devastated, but he did not step toward her. He said, "Go home, Brielle." She stared at him as if he had betrayed her, but he had only stopped rescuing her. When the venue manager escorted her out, the doors closed behind the version of my family that had always needed me silent. I thought revenge would feel louder. Instead, it felt like standing still while the truth did what I used to do for it. Daniel offered me his hand for our first dance, and for the first time that day, nobody in my family controlled the center of the room. I did. And that was when I understood. My revenge was not ruining my family. My revenge was letting them appear exactly as they were. Our first dance began after Brielle was escorted out, but the room still held the shape of what had happened. Daniel took my hand and led me to the center, and for a moment I felt every eye on us, waiting to see whether I would smile like a bride was supposed to smile. My body was shaking. My heart had not caught up with the fact that the ceremony was over, that I was married, that my sister had left, and that my father was behind me with no role left to perform. Daniel did not ask me to look happy. He did not tell me to forget it or say that at least everything worked out. He leaned close and said, "You don't have to be okay right now." I swallowed. "I'm not." "Then we'll be not okay together for a minute." That was love I had never known how to ask for. Love that did not demand a clean face before offering comfort. I let my forehead rest near his shoulder and kept moving because stopping would have made the tears harder to hold back. For the first time all day, nobody was asking me to protect their version of events. Daniel stayed with me inside the truth. Later, near the edge of the reception, Thomas approached me. He looked smaller without the position he had expected. He did not reach for my hand, and he did not ask for forgiveness, which was the only reason I let him speak. "I do not know how to fix what I have done," he said. I looked at him. "You do not start by asking me to make you feel better." He nodded. "I know." "No," I said. "You're starting to know. That is not the same thing." The words hurt because part of me still wanted his apology to be enough. Part of me wanted to hand him an easier road back. But I had spent my life building bridges to people who kept burning them from the other side, then acting surprised when I arrived exhausted. I told him he could not call my pain dramatic. He could not use Brielle's emotions as a reason to abandon me. He could not use the word family like a locked door I was supposed to open from the inside. He could not reclaim a role through one public apology, one guilty face, or one late offer at the aisle. If he wanted a relationship with me, it would have to be built without me shrinking to make room for his comfort. You do not get access to the new version of me, I said, until you understand what the old version survived. Thomas closed his eyes, and for once I did not rescue him from shame. Marianne came over later, crying in the careful way she used when she hoped sadness would become a substitute for accountability. I was just trying to keep the family together, she said. You kept the family comfortable by making me carry the discomfort. I never wanted to hurt you, but you were willing to let me be hurt if it kept everyone else calm. That was the part she could not answer, because that had always been the bargain. My peace was negotiable. Brielle's was sacred. Thomas's image mattered. Marianne's tears mattered. My pain only mattered when it threatened to become visible. I told them both I was not making a grand forgiveness speech at my wedding. I was not cutting them off theatrically in the middle of the reception either, because even that would give them a scene to hide behind. But I was done pretending the relationship was fine. Future contact would require accountability. Brielle would not be welcome in my home, my marriage, or my private life until she took responsibility without turning herself into the victim. When Evelyn gave her toast, the room became still. She raised her glass and said, "Every child deserves someone who shows up before the room is watching. May this marriage be a place where love is practiced, not performed." It was short, but it reached places in me that longer speeches never had. Near the end of the reception, Jenna approached with her camera and asked gently, "Do you still want a father-daughter portrait?" Thomas heard it, so did Marianne, so did Evelyn. I looked at my father, then I said, "No, take one with Evelyn." No one shouted. Nothing shattered. But Thomas lowered his eyes, and I knew the image was gone forever. The official album would not lie. Afterward, I checked my phone and saw Brielle's text. "You turned everyone against me. I hope you're proud. For the first time in my life, someone demanded my guilt, and I did not hand it over." I said nothing. Jenna showed me the preview before we left. It was me in my wedding dress, Evelyn beside me, and Daniel waiting beyond us. Not the family picture I once wanted, the truth. That photograph became the first family portrait I ever believed. The wedding did not magically heal me. I wish I could say that walking into that ceremony with Evelyn beside me erased the hurt, but it did not. My father still chose my sister first. My mother still helped hide it. Brielle still tried to turn the most vulnerable moment of my life into something she could own. Those facts did not become smaller because Daniel and I exchanged rings, or because people applauded, or because the reception ended with a photograph I could finally believe in. But something changed in me that day. The pain stopped convincing me I was unworthy. For most of my life, every time my family made me feel small, I looked for a way to become easier to love. I thought if I asked for less, forgave faster, smiled through more, and stayed quiet long enough, somebody would eventually notice how much it cost me. Instead, they kept raising the price. They called me strong when they meant useful. They called me calm when they meant convenient. They called me forgiving when they meant available for the next injury. So, if you are the person your family only remembers when they need you to be quiet, I need you to hear me clearly. Being strong does not mean you deserve to be unsupported. Being calm does not mean you were not hurt. Being forgiving does not mean people get unlimited access to you. Being the easy child does not mean you were loved well. And a parent who appears only when people are watching is not the same as a parent who showed up when it mattered. For a long time, I thought revenge had to look like destruction. I thought it meant shouting, exposing secrets, making people feel the same public shame they tried to hand me. But that day taught me something different. The revenge was not that I embarrassed them. The revenge was that I stopped protecting them from the embarrassment they created. I did not stand at the front of the ceremony and give a speech about every missed birthday, every empty chair, Every time Brielle cried louder and got comfort while I stayed quiet and got forgotten. I did not scream at my mother for choosing appearances over me. I did not beg my father to explain why my pain was always easier to spend than Brielle's disappointment. I did not sabotage my own wedding to punish them. I simply refused to perform a lie. The truth did the rest. My father did not lose his place beside me because I was cruel. He lost it because he treated that place like a costume he could put on after someone else had done the work. He wanted the photograph, the aisle, the title, and the public grace of being seen as my father, without carrying the private responsibility of acting like one. By the time he came back, the role had already been filled by the woman who saw the empty chairs before anyone else cared to count them. And Brielle's punishment was not being asked to leave the reception. It was losing control of the story. She wanted me to look abandoned. Instead, people saw her manipulation. She wanted Thomas to look loyal to her. Instead, he looked weak. She wanted Marianne's tears to cover everything. Instead, they made her silence visible. She wanted Evelyn to look like a replacement. Instead, Evelyn looked like the person who had earned the place long before the wedding. That final photograph became proof of what I had finally understood. I was in my dress, Evelyn was beside me, and Daniel was waiting just beyond us with his hand out. Thomas was not in the frame, not because I erased him, but because he erased himself before the camera ever clicked. For the first time, the picture did not ask me to pretend. It told the truth, and the truth looked peaceful. Because sometimes freedom begins the moment you stop making someone else's absence look softer than it really was for everyone. I did not walk into my marriage fatherless. I walked into it finally understanding that family is not who claims the title. Family is who showed up before the title mattered. So tell me honestly, if your father came back 5 minutes before the ceremony after choosing someone else first, would you let him walk you down the aisle, or would you choose the person who had actually been there?